Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today we are diving into some of the darkest, creepiest, and most terrifying games ever made. Before we start, if you enjoy horror games, scary stories, and top 10 gaming lists, make sure to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications, so you do not miss the next video. There are games that scare you for just one moment. A jump scare, a sudden sound, a monster around the corner. But then there are games that work in a completely different way. They do not end when you turn off the screen. They stay in your head. You still remember that corridor, that sound, that silence, that feeling when you realized that nowhere was safe anymore. Today, we are looking at the top 10 scariest games of all time. These are games that became famous not only because of monsters, blood, or shock effects. Some of them scare you with atmosphere, others scare you with the feeling of helplessness. And some of them use psychological pressure so well that you start questioning not only what you see on the screen, but also what you understand about the story. This is not just a list of games with monsters. This is a list of games that know how to get under your skin. Let's start with number 10. At number 10, we have Phasmophobia. At first glance, this game looks very simple. You and your friends arrive at a haunted house, grab your equipment, walk inside, and try to figure out what kind of ghost is hiding there. But that simplicity is exactly what makes this game so terrifying. There is no huge action here. There are no weapons that make you feel safe. There is no perfect plan that always works. You have a thermometer, a camera, a flashlight, a microphone, and a few other tools, but once the house starts reacting to your presence, everything changes. One moment, you are calmly walking through rooms, looking for evidence. The next moment, your flashlight starts flickering, the doors slam shut, and your friend's voice suddenly disappears over the radio. And that is when you realize you are no longer the investigator. You are the victim. One of the strongest parts of this game is the sound design. Every creak, every footstep, every quiet breath somewhere near you can make you freeze. Sometimes you are not even sure whether it was a game sound or your friend, and that uncertainty creates real panic. It becomes even scarier when you play with voice chat. The game turns into not only a horror experience, but also a social panic simulator. One friend is screaming, another is hiding in a closet, another has no idea where the exit is, and you are standing alone in a dark room, hoping the ghost does not find you first. Phasmophobia is not the most visually impressive horror game in the world, but it has one very powerful strength. It makes you feel afraid together with other people. And sometimes, your friend's scream is scarier than the ghost itself. At number 9, we have Layers of Fear. This is a psychological horror game that feels very different from traditional horror games. You are not simply being chased by monsters. There is no basic goal like survive and escape. Instead, the game slowly takes you through the mind of a person who is falling apart right in front of your eyes. You play as an artist. At first, it seems like you are just walking through an old house, trying to understand what happened, but very quickly, you realize that this house is not normal. You turn around, the room has changed. You open a door, the same corridor is no longer there. You look at a painting, it is distorted, ugly, almost alive. Layers of Fear is scary because you can never trust your surroundings. The game constantly changes the rules. It knows that the player expects a room to stay the same if they look at it again. But no, in this game, the space moves, changes, misleads you, and almost mocks you. The biggest fear in this game is not what can kill you. The biggest fear is the question, is anything you are seeing actually real? Every painting, every shadow, every sound feels like part of something bigger. Something that is happening not only inside the house, but inside the main character's mind. The game uses psychological pressure very well. It does not always jump straight into your face. Sometimes it simply lets you walk through silence until you start expecting something terrible to happen. And once you start waiting for it, every small change becomes scary. Layers of Fear is a slower horror game. It is perfect for players who enjoy atmosphere, mystery, and the feeling that reality itself is slowly breaking apart. This is not a game that screams at you all the time. This is a game that quietly whispers in your ear until you start feeling uncomfortable. At number 8, we have Fatal Frame II, Crimson Butterfly. This is one of the strongest Japanese horror games ever made, and many horror fans still consider it one of the scariest games in history. The main idea of the game is very simple, but also brilliant. You are in a haunted village full of ghosts, but instead of guns, knives, or any normal weapons, your main protection is a camera. And that is where the real fear begins. Because in order to defend yourself from a ghost, you have to look directly at it. You do not run away. You do not shoot from a distance. You do not hide behind a wall. You have to raise the camera, aim it at the face of the thing coming toward you, and wait for the right moment to take the shot. This creates an incredible amount of tension. The closer the ghost gets, the stronger your attack becomes, but the closer it gets, the more panic you feel. That means the game forces you to do exactly what no one would want to do in a horror situation, not turn away from fear, but look straight into its eyes. Fatal Frame II stands out because of its atmosphere. This is not Western horror filled with loud noises, blood, and aggressive monsters. The horror here is slow, quiet, and deeply uncomfortable. Old villages, wooden houses, empty rooms, past tragedies, and ghosts that feel not only dangerous, but also sad. And that makes them even scarier. In this game, you often feel like you are in a place where you truly should not be, as if you have walked into someone else's nightmare. The village looks abandoned, but it never feels empty. It feels like something is always watching you. Every corner can hide a ghost. Every second of silence can end with a sudden appearance. And when you raise the camera to your eyes, the screen narrows and the ghost begins moving closer. That is when you understand why this game is legendary. Fatal Frame II is horror about inevitability. You know something is coming. You know you have to look. And you still do not want to do it. At number 7, we have Resident Evil 7, Biohazard. This game was a massive turning point for the entire Resident Evil series. After several entries that leaned more toward action, Resident Evil 7 brought the franchise back to true horror, but it did it in a different way, through a first-person perspective. And that changed everything. In older Resident Evil games, you often saw your character from the outside, but here you see everything through the character's eyes. You see the narrow corridors, dirty walls, broken furniture, disturbing silence, and strange sounds somewhere above you. Everything feels much more personal. You enter the Baker family house, and very quickly you realize this is not just an abandoned building. This is a place that feels rotten, not only physically, but morally. Everything is dirty, unpleasant, sticky, and claustrophobic. The game plays strongly, with the feeling of being trapped in a stranger's home, with people who are no longer normal. The Baker family is one of the strongest parts of the game. They are not just simple monsters. They talk, laugh, mock you, chase you, and behave as if you are now part of their home. That creates an incredibly uncomfortable feeling, because the enemies here are not distant fantasy creatures. They look almost human, but something is horribly wrong with them. And that almost human feeling is what makes them so frightening. Resident Evil 7 also controls its packing very well. One moment you are exploring the house, looking for a key or an item. The next moment something bursts into the room and you have to decide in 1 second, run, hide, or fight. But even when you have a weapon, you never feel completely safe. Ammo is limited, health is limited, enemies are strong, and the environment is so narrow that sometimes there is nowhere to escape. This is a game that manages to be survival horror, psychological pressure, and dirty body horror all at once. Resident Evil 7 is scary because it locks you inside a house where every room feels like a mistake you never should have entered. At number 6, we have Dead Space. Space is already a terrifying place by itself. There is no help, no light, no air. If something goes wrong, you cannot just run outside. Now imagine being inside a massive spaceship where something horrifying has happened to the entire crew. That is the atmosphere of Dead Space. You play as Isaac Clarke, an engineer who arrives at a ship that was supposed to be repaired. But very quickly, it becomes clear that what remains on the ship is not human anymore. It is something twisted, disgusting, and unnatural. Necromorphs are some of the most terrifying enemies in horror games. They look like human bodies, but transformed into something brutal. Arms turned into blades, bodies distorted, movements unnatural. They are not just scary because of how they look, they remind you that they used to be people. And that makes everything even more disturbing. Dead Space uses its environment perfectly. The spaceship is full of narrow corridors, flickering lights, blood stains, ventilation shafts, and empty rooms, but you are never sure if a room is truly empty. The vents in this game almost become a psychological weapon. You know that an enemy can come out at any moment, from the front, from the side, from behind, sometimes even when you think you are safe. Sound is also extremely important here. Metal creaking, distant impacts, heavy breathing, whispers, something crawling through the vents, all of it creates tension even when nothing is on screen. And that is when Dead Space is at its scariest. Not when the monster is already attacking, but when you hear something and cannot see where it is coming from. Another important part is the combat system. You cannot simply shoot enemies in the head. You have to cut off limbs, control enemy movement, and manage your resources. That means every fight requires focus. Panic can easily get you killed. Dead Space is one of the best space horror games because it combines body horror, survival mechanics, and a claustrophobic atmosphere. In space, no one can hear you scream. But in this game, you can hear everything that is coming to take you. At number 5, we have Outlast. If you had to explain in one sentence why this game is so scary, the answer would be simple: you cannot fight. Many horror games give you at least some kind of hope. A knife, a pistol, a shotgun, something that makes you feel like you can defend yourself. Outlast does not. You are a journalist who enters Mount Massive Asylum. At first, it seems like you are just investigating a mysterious story, but as soon as you step inside, you realize that something much worse is happening here. The asylum looks like a living nightmare. Blood on the walls, broken doors, dark corridors, patients who no longer seem normal, and the constant feeling that something is watching you. Your main tool is a camera with night vision, and this is a very powerful design choice. In the dark, you can barely see without the camera, but the camera needs batteries, and batteries run out. That means even your only way of seeing is not guaranteed. When an enemy sees you, there is no combat. There is no maybe I can win. You run, you look for a closet, you crawl under bed, you close doors, you listen to footsteps. And you try not to breathe. Outlast uses the fear of being chased extremely well. When you hear something running behind you, your body reacts automatically. Your heart starts beating faster. You stop thinking clearly. You start making mistakes. You turn into the wrong corridor. You get stuck at a door. You forget where the hiding place is. And that is exactly what the game wants. The game is also very strong because of its atmosphere of madness. It is hard to understand what is dangerous and what is not. Some characters just sit there and talk nonsense. Others suddenly attack. Some look like victims but still feel threatening. You cannot trust anyone. Outlast is scary not because it has the most complicated story or the deepest psychology. It is scary because it very effectively takes control away from you. You are not a hero. You are not a fighter. You are a person with a camera, trapped in a place that is extremely difficult to escape. And when the camera starts flickering and the battery is almost empty, that is when the real horror begins. At number 4, we have Amnesia, The Dark Descent. This is one of the most important modern horror games ever made. Many games after it tried to copy the same formula: first-person perspective, no weapons, darkness, hiding, and psychological pressure. But Amnesia did it so well that it still remains one of the scariest examples of the genre. The game begins with a very strong idea. Your character wakes up inside a castle and remembers almost nothing. You do not know what happened. You do not know who you can trust. You do not know why you are here. And then you begin going deeper into the castle. Atmosphere is the main weapon here. Old stone walls, weak candlelight, creaking sounds, long corridors, and the constant feeling that something is nearby. But one of the most important mechanics is sanity. Darkness in this game is not just a visual element, it affects your character. The longer you stay in the dark, the more he loses his mind. The screen begins to change, sounds become stranger, and the controls feel less stable. This makes you truly afraid of the dark. But at the same time, light is not always safety. If you light up the wrong place, you may attract attention. If you stay too long in one area, you may be found. Amnesia creates situations where no choice feels good. You have no weapon. When you see a monster, the best thing you can do is hide. Do not look directly at it. Wait, listen as it walks around nearby. And that waiting is unbearable. Other horror games often let you learn the enemies. You understand their movements, weaknesses, and patterns, but Amnesia keeps you weak almost the entire time. It constantly reminds you that you are not the hunter here. You are a person who has forgotten the past and now has to survive a nightmare you do not even understand. The game is scary not only because of monsters, but because of the story. The more you learn, the more uncomfortable everything becomes. The castle becomes not just a location, but a symbol of guilt, fear, and terrible choices. Amnesia, The Dark Descent is a game that made many players afraid to simply open a door. And in the horror genre, that is a huge achievement. At number 3, we have Alien, Isolation. This is one of the best survival horror games of all time, and one of the best examples of how to create fear with one main monster. In many horror games, enemies eventually become predictable. You learn their routes, animations, and weak points. After some time, the fear becomes weaker because you understand how the system works. But Alien Isolation works differently. The xenomorph in this game feels alive, intelligent, and unpredictable. It does not simply walk along the same path. It hunts, it listens for sounds, it checks places, it appears when you least want to see it. Sometimes it walks past you, sometimes it stops, sometimes it comes back. And that makes every moment tense. You are inside a space station where nothing feels safe anymore. Lights flicker, systems fail, people panic, androids become threats, but above everything else, there is one thing: the alien. The game perfectly captures the feeling of being prey. You are not a soldier going out to destroy a monster. You are a person trying to survive against a creature that is faster, stronger, and far more dangerous than you. The motion tracker is one of the most stressful tools in the game. It should make you feel safer, but often it does the opposite. When you see a small dot moving toward you, panic starts to build. You hear the beeping. The dot gets closer. You hide under a table. It stops. You do not know whether it left or whether it is standing right outside the door. This is horror built on waiting. Another very strong part of the game is the sound design. Ventilation shafts, metal noises, distant impacts, the xenomorph's footsteps above you. Sometimes you do not see it, but you hear it, and that is even scarier. Because when you cannot see the threat, your imagination fills in the blanks. Alien Isolation also respects the atmosphere of the original Alien film extremely well. This is not a fast action game about shooting monsters. This is a slow, tense, claustrophobic survival experience in space. One wrong sound. One movement that is too fast. One badly chosen hiding spot. And it is over. Alien Isolation is terrifying because it almost never lets you relax. Even when you think you are alone, somewhere above you, it might still be there. And it is listening. At number 2, we have PT. Technically, it was only a demo, a short experience, one corridor, one house, one repeating loop. But that is exactly why PT became legendary. Many horror games try to scare players with large worlds, monsters, stories, and lots of mechanics. PT did the opposite. It took a very small space and turned it into one of the scariest gaming experiences ever created. You walk through the same corridor again and again. At first, it seems like nothing special is happening, but then you start noticing small changes. The doors, the light, the radio, the sounds, the pictures, something behind you. Every loop becomes more distorted, and the worst part is that the game never lets you feel like you understand the rules. You do not know what triggers the next event. You do not know whether you need to look somewhere. You do not know whether you need to wait. You do not know whether you are safe. And that uncertainty is the scariest thing of all. PT uses repetition perfectly. When the same place repeats many times, your brain starts looking for differences, and every difference becomes dangerous. One sound that was not there before. One object that has moved. One shadow in the corner. The game makes you afraid not only of what happens, but of what could happen. Another powerful thing is that PT almost never feels like a normal game. It feels more like a nightmare. The kind where you are trapped in a place that looks familiar, but also completely wrong. The corridor is not large, but it becomes a prison. Every turn back could be a mistake. Every step forward could bring you closer to something you do not want to see. And Lisa, the ghostly figure, became one of the most iconic figures in modern horror. She is not always visible, but her presence is felt almost all the time. That is real horror, when the enemy is not only on the screen, but also inside your head. PT is short, but its impact was massive. It showed that horror does not need a lot. All it needs is perfect atmosphere, strong sound design, a small space, and the feeling that something is standing behind you, even when you do not want to turn around. At number 1, we have Silent Hill 2. This is not only one of the scariest games in history, it is one of the strongest works of psychological horror in general. Many horror games scare you with direct danger. Monsters attack, you run, you fight, you survive. But Silent Hill 2 works deeper than that. It does not only want to scare you, it wants to make you feel uncomfortable. And it succeeds. The story begins with James Sunderland, who receives a letter from his dead wife. The letter calls him to the town of Silent Hill. That alone is strange, sad, and disturbing. When James arrives in the town, he finds fog, empty streets, and the feeling that something is very wrong. Silent Hill is not just a town. It feels like a place between reality and nightmare. Everything is empty but not peaceful. The streets look abandoned but you feel watched. The fog hides not only the road but also the truth. And that is what makes this game so powerful. The monsters in Silent Hill 2 are not random. They feel like symbols, like something born from guilt, trauma, sexuality, pain, and the subconscious. They are not just enemies you need to defeat. They are messages you do not understand at first. And once you begin to understand them, it becomes even scarier. Pyramid Head is one of the most iconic monsters in horror gaming, but he is scary not only because of his appearance. He is scary because he feels like punishment, like something that did not appear by accident. His presence has meaning, and that meaning is far more uncomfortable than a simple monster with a big weapon. The game is also incredibly strong because of its sound. Akira Yamaoka's music and sound design create an atmosphere that is almost impossible to forget. Sometimes the music is sad, sometimes it is industrial and unpleasant, sometimes there is just silence, and that silence feels heavier than any sound. Silent Hill 2 also uses slow packing very well. It does not rush. It lets you walk through empty places, listen to the radio static, stare into the fog, and feel that something is coming. The radio static became one of the scariest sounds in horror history. When it starts crackling, you know something is nearby, but the fog and darkness often prevent you from immediately understanding where. That creates a very specific kind of fear, not shock, but pressure. But the real horror of Silent Hill 2 is in its story. The further you go, the more you understand that this game is not just about a town. It is about a person trying to escape the truth. And Silent Hill does not allow escape. The town forces characters to face what they are hiding: guilt, loss, desire, pain, the things they do not want to admit even to themselves. That is why Silent Hill 2 is scary in a different way from most horror games. It does not try to scare you for 1 second. It slowly builds atmosphere, story, and symbolism until you finally understand that the scariest thing here is not the monster. The scariest thing is the truth. Because of its atmosphere, music, story, symbolism, and psychological pressure, Silent Hill 2 still remains, for many players, the scariest game of all time. Not because it screams the loudest, but because it quietly gets inside your head and stays there. That was my list of the top 10 scariest games of all time. Of course, horror is very subjective. Some people are scared the most by jump scares, others are scared by psychological pressure, and some are scared by the feeling of being helpless, trapped, or hunted. But all the games on this list have one thing in common: they create fear that lasts longer than 1 second. My personal top 3 would be Silent Hill 2, PT, and Alien Isolation. Now write in the comments, what game scared you the most? Was it Outlast? Was it Resident Evil 7? Or maybe it was a game that I did not even mention on this list. If you enjoyed the video, leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications for more horror gaming videos. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next one.